What's up everybody, Jason from Jason's Exotic Reptiles. Today we're going to talk about how to get your snake from eating live to frozen thawed. So this is a question that I've got quite a few times, and I'm right in the middle of doing this myself. So that's kind of what sparked this video topic. I thought now was a good time to do it, so let's jump right into it. So to get your snake from eating live to frozen thawed, maybe you just got this animal in and the breeder says no, it's only on live. Maybe you've had a snake for a while and you're about just time to switch over. Now it's the time to do it. So let's talk kind of right into why the snakes don't necessarily want to eat frozen thawed. And we're not going to get into the pros and cons of it. That's a whole nother video that I've already done. So if you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. Now's a good time to mention, if you haven't dropped the thumbs up already, make sure you do that. And keep subscribing. Hit that little bell notification next to the subscription button. So jumping right into it, the first thing that I do when I'm trying to switch from live to frozen thawed would be just offer a frozen thawed. I mean, that's obviously the easiest thing, and if you're watching this video, you've probably already tried that. But so there's different things, there's different ways that we can offer that. So step one, at least how I defrost my rodents, my frozen thawed rodents, is I'll put them in some warm water and let them defrost for a while until they've hit that kind of room temperature that I'm looking for. Once they do that, I'm going to take my tongs and I'm going to offer it to them. Do they eat it? Do they not? If they eat it, fantastic. There's no point watching this video. Pause it or turn it off, and no need to watch this. Go watch another video. If they haven't, let's move on to the next step. So there's different ways that I'll defrost. So first thing, I'm going to do what I always do, because that's what's easiest and most convenient for me, is just in the tub of water. Now, some snakes, the scent can be washed off that rodent and they need a little bit more drive in there. So what I might do is I'll take like a Ziploc bag and I'll put the rodent inside the Ziploc bag, defrost it at room temperature for a little bit until it gets to that kind of nice warm temperature. And I might even use like a heat lamp. But what I'll first do is I'll offer it at that room temperature. The goal being that I never want to add more work for myself to get the desired end product. I always want to try to do this as simply as I can to get what I want out of it. So I might defrost it in that bag at room temperature, see if it feeds. If it doesn't, I'll take it out right away and I'll get it to under maybe a heat lamp, or I'll put it on a heat pad to warm it up a little bit more. You never want to use the microwave. The microwave will create hot spots and there's a good chance that the rodent's going to explode in your microwave, so you definitely don't want to do that. If it doesn't explode, at the very least, you could have really warm spots within the internal organs of the rodent, and that could burn your snake as it's eating it. So we don't want to use the microwave. We want to use something like a heat lamp. Put it under the heat lamp for 5 or 10 minutes. Safe distance away, 12 inches or so, just enough to get a little bit warmer than room temperature. We got to remember that these snakes, at least to our knowledge, are kind of, they're going off the thermal signature. So they want to see something that, one, smells like a rodent, and two, has the right heat signature. Is it warmer than everything else around it? Otherwise, in the infrared view or in the thermal view, it's going to give you kind of this blur of the similar colored items, and that rodent might even be cooler than the room temperature itself, depending on how you thought it out. So my goal, again, try to get it to that, when I wave it in front of the snake with my tongs, I always use some tongs because I don't want it focusing on my hand. I want it to focus on the rodent. The goal is to get it to focus on that and grab it. If it doesn't grab it, the next step I'll do, I'll kind of close the bin or close your enclosure, put it aside, walk away for an hour or two, put it back under the heat lamp for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I might try to offer it again. If it still doesn't take it, I'll leave it in the enclosure and I'll close it. I'll do this overnight. So a lot of the times with these picky feeders, that kind of dusk and dawn time period is when they're hunting. I mean, in the middle of the night they're hunting as well, but it's not a time where I'm personally going to be coming down here at midnight, 1 in the morning to offer food. Sometimes I do, just because that's where my schedule allows. But for the most part, I'm doing it either like right before I go to bed, or I might get up real early the next day and try to catch them right before they're kind of going away for the day. This is for more of those nocturnal species. If you're in the diurnal species, things like corn snakes, then you may want to try this during the day. Kind of peak time, but it's still, those dusk dawn periods are likely the perfect time to feed, because that's when the natural predators, or when the natural prey, are going to be coming out and the predators are going to be searching for them. So dusk and dawn really are the best times to try to use these tricks for these trouble feeders. So we've covered defrosting it in water, we've covered defrosting it in a bag, we've covered showing it and then leaving it in overnight. Still no take. The thing doesn't go at it. First, I guess the next question I'm going to ask is, when's the last time it ate? sometimes these snakes, depending on the species and depending on the age, they may be eating everywhere from once a week to once a month or so, again, depending on the prey size that you're trying to do. This might be a little bit more tricky for some older animals who are set in their habits, but a lot of the times the older animals already have that prey drive. They already know what that smell is and they'll go after it. So either way, this video is applicable to both situations, but let's assume kind of a younger animal that's been fed live and we just got it in and we're trying to feed it this. So neither of those things worked for us. What's the next step? What are we going to do? So be consistent. Sometimes my advice is just to wait it out. Skip the week and then try again the following week. Skip the week, try again the following week. So you're going to do that for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. If you're still unsuccessful, there's some other things that we can do is we can try to take that snake out of that enclosure, put it in a feeding bin that is kind of just isolated, no bedding, nothing else, then close it up and leave it overnight with the rodent in there. A lot of the times that's kind of the piece or the trick that really triggers them, but sometimes it isn't. So the next step that I would say I don't want to call it my final step, but my final step after that is I'm going to start using an interface of live and frozen thawed. So I'm going to take that live prey, but I'm going to use a small live prey. So if this thing was normally eating, I don't know, this snake here, this is just a hypoboa. But if this snake here is eating medium or large rats, I might put in a mouse, a live mouse, but then I'll also put in like a mouse or a rat, a very small one. So an equivalent size. Something where they can eat 2 prey items, but it's not going to expand in their stomach and leave them bloated and with a massive swell in them. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll eat that live prey and then they'll still be hungry because it's not a sufficient meal size, but they still smell a rodent around. So the goal is to get them to understand that this thing that doesn't look natural, and it really isn't natural. In the wild, they wouldn't necessarily come across a dead prey item, but a lot of the times in the wild, they'll still eat it because they know what it is. So it's really not so much about getting them to eat the frozen, it's about getting them to recognize that that frozen item is actually a food item. And that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to program them into thinking that, hey, this thing is food. Not that this thing can't be eaten, but they don't know what it is. And that's really kind of the challenge with baby snakes. So I mentioned to start this video off, I'm in the middle of this myself. That's because I have a whole bunch of babies and they don't know what food is yet. So some of them, first thing I do with the baby snakes is I'm going to offer them frozen right from the start. If they eat it, that's fantastic, and a lot of the times they'll continue eating frozen thawed, and they might be fantastic eaters. Many times I'll get about half of the clutch or half of the litter that will eat frozen thawed right from the start, and then the other half is going to lag behind. So my goal with that is to build up the feeding response. So if you have an older animal, that feeding response probably is already there, and I really think that that smaller live prey with the smaller frozen prey can help. But with the babies, what I want to do is the first couple meals, I'm going to feed them live. I want to get that prey drive going. I want them to associate the smell, the size, the shape, that kind of just everything about a rodent with that this is food. And they're programmed naturally that this item, this little mouse that is 98 or 100 and something degrees, whatever the temperature of a mouse is their food. They get the smell, they get the heat, and they go after it. And they also get the movement. So I think that's key in programming into them that this item that we're trying to show them, this frozen thawed item that's a little unnatural, is something that they can eat. They don't know what it is. It could be a pencil that smells like a rat for all they know, but that's what we need to get them to associate. So with the baby, I'm going to do live, then I'll offer frozen, kind of a week or so in between. So week 1, I'm going to give them live. Good, they ate it. Week 2, I'm going to give them live. Great, they ate it. Week 3, I'm going to kind of wiggle a warm, defrosted rodent in front of them, and I want to get them to associate, hopefully they're going to bite it right away and we're in good shape. Sometimes I'll try the overnight trick, but that's where I'm going to start my progression. Goal 1 is to always get them eating. Then there's other questions that I'm going to ask as well. If you contacted me outside of YouTube and you said, hey, I tried all your tricks, the thing's not eating. I'm going to ask you kind of, all right, what are your temperatures? What's your humidity? And how often are you handling it? A lot of the times, the reason why these things are not eating is because we're handling them too often, especially if it's a new snake. And this could be for eating in general. Sometimes I'll get questions of, hey, my snake's not eating, just got it in from this breeder. The breeder said it was eating fine. Well, how often are you holding it? Usually their follow-up question is, I don't want it to be aggressive and I don't want it to bite me, so I'm holding it every day. Well, step one is you want to get these snakes eating and healthy. These animals live a long time and you're going to have plenty of time to hold them, but if you don't get it eating and you don't get it feeding regularly, then the thing's going to die on you. It's going to starve and you're going to stress it out by trying other things like force feeding. So step one, you always want to reduce the stress, make sure your temperatures are right, make sure your humidity's right, and that's when you're going to try to feed. Then another question is, well, what's the time of year and what age is the animal? What type of animal is it? A lot of these animals in the wintertime, they're going to go off feed naturally. So you could have just got this snake in. Let's say I shipped you a snake. The snake's not eating. That's kind of the questions I'm going to run down through. Is what's your temperatures? What's your humidity? I'm going to think what's the animal and what's the time of year, but then also how often you're holding it. 9 times out of 10, it's because people are holding these animals way too often, and when you're trying to transition, you really want to keep it to an as-need basis. I tell them, don't go in the cage for any other reason other than to change the water bowl, change the bedding, and when you do that, there should be zero reason to actually move the animal, unless you're using something like newspaper as bedding, and then in that case, you take the animal out, change the cage, disinfect, and then put the animal back in. There's no reason to take the animal out and mess with it for 10 minutes. The snake doesn't want a bath. It doesn't want any of this stuff. Again, do that in a couple weeks. Once the thing is eating and you have established a good relationship and the snake's healthy, now you can manipulate it and you can start playing with the animal and socializing them. But step one is always getting that animal eating so that you can have that lifelong experience with this animal that's going to be a fantastic pet. But don't over focus on, I need to handle this because I don't want it to be aggressive and bite me. So I kind of ran through all that. The container trick is similar to putting the snake in a bag. A lot of people will say take a bag and we can do it that way. There's one step that I did skip that I do want to touch on. This is kind of like, I don't really, with the pre-killed. Pre-killed is kind of the last step. Is all right. So I've tried the frozen thawed in the water. I've tried it in just the bag. I've tried it with the live. I've tried it and it's eating live. That's a big piece. Is the snake eating live? If you can get it to eat live, what you can do is you can try pre-killed and then you can try frozen, because we're trying to check the box and go down this list of things of what could be the cause. Once we figure out the cause, whether it doesn't recognize this or it's not warm enough or whatever it might be, that's what we're trying to focus on. The last thing that we can try to do is certain species have animals that they like more. Burmese pythons, for instance, or let's use Demeral's boas. So Demeral's boas, generally, the babies aren't going to be super attracted to mice, so we might want to try quail. Quail is something that is a kind of a breeder trick that I learned a few years ago in getting my baby Demeral's boas to eat, is that this is what they naturally eat. Same thing with Burmese pythons. Burmese pythons, a lot of the times the little babies will be up in a tree and they might be snagging birds. So birds are a good way to get your Burmese python eating off of frozen thawed. Something about birds and certain species, or even lizard eaters. If we're talking about lizard eaters, we're in a whole different ball game, and a lot of the things in this video will apply, but you really have to have a knowledge of the animal to do this. But so let's say Burmese pythons. What I will not recommend doing is feed that bird prey item as prey item number 1, because a lot of the times they will get stuck on these prey. So you feed the bird, especially a problem feeder, and it's just never going to want to eat anything else. Or now you have a whole different problem of, great, it's eating a frozen thawed bird, but I can't get it to eat a frozen thawed rodent. So what I like to do is I will like to take that prey item, whether it be a bird or a lizard or whatever it might be that it's attracted to, and I'll defrost them both in the same bag. So I'll take it, I'll put it in a big Ziploc bag or a small Ziploc bag, little sandwich bag, and I'll put the prey, the rodent, and I'll put the bird in the same bag, but I'll put them so that they're both on top of each other and touching each other. And that's going to try to transfer as much scent as I can within this reasonable time period to that prey. Then what I'll do is, as soon as it's ready to be defrosted, and again I'll warm it up, is I'll take the two prey items and I'll rub them together so I really get the scent of that bird onto the mouse. Hopefully it takes. If it doesn't take, I might try that one more week again. Remember, these are cold-blooded animals. Don't freak out if your animal doesn't eat 3, 4, 5 weeks, even if you were telling me it didn't eat in 9 months, I'd say, all right, it's time to freak out a little bit. You're doing something wrong, or the snake isn't healthy. But if it's been a month, maybe even 2 months, depending on the age of the animal, it's not a big deal. These snakes will often go in periods in the wild where they don't find food, or they'll often go in periods of the wild or in captivity where we don't feed them because it's just their off period. So don't freak out if it's been a couple months. A couple months is kind of pushing it specifically for a baby snake, but you definitely don't want to get frustrated and try to force feed. So I know I'm getting this video's getting a little bit long, but and my thoughts are all over the place, but force feeding is another huge reason why your snake isn't eating. Is a lot of the times people will get frustrated and they'll start screwing with the snake. I'll grab the snake in the back of the head, I'll try to jam the mouse in its mouth, and I'll put it down, doing all this stuff that's causing a tremendous amount of stress to the snake. And one, you're stressing it out, so now it doesn't want to eat anymore, it doesn't feel comfortable. And two, you're kind of getting the snake afraid of whatever the heck this frozen thing is that we're trying to feed it. Once they recognize what it is, it's usually a very quick uptake on the snake eating that frozen thawed, but it's really getting over that initial hurdle of getting them to eat it. And maybe I'll cut the video here because I think I've run through a few different ways. If you guys have other ways, please drop them in the comments because I'm always learning myself, and there's been some great tips and tricks that I've learned from you guys. So please keep dropping them in the comments. Again, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Hopefully this helps out a few of you guys. I hope it does, whether it's now or in the future. I hope you guys never have this problem, but if you do, hopefully this video helps. So if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe, hit that bell notification, give me a thumbs up, share the videos, and hopefully this helps. Love that you guys are continuing to watch the channel, and this is continuing to grow. Thank you all, and yeah, wish you the best of luck. Thanks, guys.